Hi, everyone. It's good to have so many interested participants with us today. Thank you for joining us on the webinar, which is entitled The Role of Data Analytics in Strategy and Organization Design. So we're bridging the two experts today, two experts' perspective. Our first speaker is Wei-Ru Chen. Wei-Ru is the Executive Director of the Alibaba Industry Internet Center. He's also Associate Professor of Strategy at CEIBS. And in 2017, Weiru was selected as one of the world's management thinkers who are most likely to shape the future of how organizations are managed and led in the Thinkers 50 radar list. Weiru will speak today about the role of data analytics in decision-making practice using the Alibaba example. Weiru, it's great to have you with us. Our second speaker today is Phanish Puranam. He is the Roland Berger Chaired Professor of Strategy and Organization Design at INSEAD. And as most of you know, he has published extensively in the area of strategy and organization design. His recent book, The Microstructure of Organizations, offers researchers a new perspective on organization design. Phanish will speak about organization design in the age of algorithms. And Phanish, it's also really great to have you with us today. Just as a reminder, before we get started, we will listen to both presentations first. In the meantime, you can ask your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat function, which is disabled today. But please ask your questions in the Q&A box. We will select your questions later on after the presentations are over. That being said, I turn the floor to you, Phanish. Looking forward to your presentation.
I believe Weiru has the first honor. So Weiru, if you'd like to go first, I'll follow up. Right?
Yes, yeah, of course I can do that. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And thanks for the invitation from Patricia and Daniel and SMS. And I'm honored to share my observation inside Alibaba with you. I think when they came to me asking whether data analytics has already made into place in helping strategic decision in Alibaba, I think over and find that it has not directly impact the strategic decision making. In my observation, Alibaba is continue to. I think strategy decision making continue to be a human, handmade, handcraft kind of a process. But I want to share with you two cases that I have found the data analytics has making impact on the decision making of managing a platform ecosystem, and also the second is the managing the new product decision making. So I briefly introduce myself. I have 15 years experience of strategy professor, first at INSEAD and then CEIBS based in Shanghai. And I have the fortune to join Alibaba for 3 years. The first job is Chief Strategy Officer at the China Network, one of the Alibaba's major logistic arms. And the second is to establish the Alibaba Industry Internet Center, and I serve as the executive director. And the first case I want to show to you is that in my observation, inside the Alibaba, it can be divided into multiple modules. It started from e-commerce module, and then Taobao, Tmall together take more than 75% of the China's e-commerce market. And then Alibaba established the finance arm. It's called Ant Financing, to doing the inclusive financing, which is the leading internet finance company in China right now. And because there are a lot of data, so Alibaba developed the cloud computing, and the cloud computing take more than 50 to 60% of the market share. It's very much just like Amazon's cloud computing in US. And then Alibaba established the Cainiao network. It is a smart logistic company, which I serve as a chief strategy officer there. So the first example I want to share with you is about how Cainiao leverage on the data to help in decision making. And the second example is about Tmall and Taobao, how they cooperate with global brands to develop new products. So logistics in China is quite in large scale. It has more than double of the volumes compared with the US. And there is 110 million shipping per day. And however, in the supplier side, the concentration ratio of the logistic companies in China is far less than in the US. The top 10 only take no more than 10% of the market share. And then you can see that with the very scattered companies, they are medium and small. They did not have the money or mindset to invest in the state-of-art equipment to improve their service. That gives a way for Cainiao to develop a platform business model. As a platform business model, meaning that the Cainiao did not do something like Amazon.com did or JD.com, the counterpart of Amazon in China. Cainiao did not have their own labor to deliver the products. Cainiao has only 3,000 people compared with the largest delivery company SF, which has 30,000 people. And however, Cainiao tried to use technology to enable multiple delivery company in China, namely the number 2 to number 1,000 are under the help of Cainiao to deliver their job, to do their delivery job. But the number 1 did not want to join Cainiao. And I think I want to introduce one killer applications. What Cainiao did in China is to change the handmade shipping label into the digital label. With the digital label, is able to understand what happened in the whole value chain, and there are more than 80 trees. Like every product that has been purchased by the consumer, and Cainiao will assign a ID for the parcel, and the parcel will go through the warehouse for the distribution to the different zones, and the driver will scan the barcode of the Cainiao's e-shipping label, and to make sure that the product has already go into the particular truck, and the truck arrive at the community regional station, and then it check out, and then the next delivery person check in and deliver this product into the cabinet. It's a smart cabinet in the neighborhood, so the consumer can use face recognition or the password into the mobile phone to pick it up. So all the delivery time and where is the parcel are making very transparent by the Cainiao's e-shipping label. And the currently Cainiao has 80% of the China's market's logistic data, and with this data, Cainiao is able to understand when the parcel is picked up or went out of the warehouse, and it is where on the highway 120 or is on the street, and who is deliver it, and maybe what kind of products inside it, and possibly if there is a delay, and the China is able to understand because of the traffic jam or because of the bad weather, etc. And with this large amount of data, China analyze it and making a public report every quarter. And the report will contain the information about the total delivery time and also the delays by each company on each division region, and there's any missing parcels, and also the consumer complaints, etc. And all these data will be made public and transparent, and therefore the 1,000 delivery company will set it as a benchmarking to compare with each other and then improve their own service. So this kind of benchmarking has become a very concrete evaluation for each company in their performance evaluation, and also the assignment of bonus, etc. So with this kind of friendly competition and also transparent data information, the delivery companies are able to improve their management. For example, China can tell the company which region, which particular person are always making mistakes, and maybe you want to deal with it. And also that the number 3 will like to benchmark with the number 2 and then improve by a quarter. And then once the number 3 pass the number 2, and the next quarter the number used to the number 2 will kind of catch up. And therefore, with this friendly competition, because of the transparent data, the whole ecosystem is improved their delivery time and the service quality. So when China was born 7 years ago, it was 5 days on average for each parcels to be delivered inside China. But right now, the whole China, the delivery days is reduced to less than 2 days. So the consumer status is largely introduced and impact new product launch decision. Then it's a Unilever and the Alibaba co-creation example. So this is a product that happened at the end of 2019. It's very fresh example. And this is a product called Love, Beauty, and the Planet. And it was launched first by Unilever in the US. And then the brand has the features of a super nature brands, and it's the finest fragrance brands, leading a brand. And then what the challenges that are faced by Unilever to bring this from global to China, where the same positioning proper in China, and then how to reach the right people in the right store, because the price of these products is 2 to 3 times of the usual Unilever products, is called a niche product. And in the US, the positioning is nature and recycle. And Unilever work with Alibaba's strategy center. It's a data strategy center. And then based on the hypothesis whether the proposition still come true when they enter into China. What Alibaba did is to scan based on the Unilever's request on the criteria of selecting 450 million, 450 4,500万 it's a 45 million potential consumer, 45 million potential consumer who will be the target consumer of Unilever, and then look at their label to see what kind of positioning is proper, and finally decide that the environment protection naturalist positioning will not be the fragrance, will be the better positioning in China. Therefore, then the next question is that how to reach these 45 million people, and then Alibaba understand their location. So the location is based on like the e-payments, right? That's the Alipay, the third-party payment, the internet payment. Understand based on the location based, and know where they are, where they travel, where they show up, and then target on those stores, superstores, the grocery shop that these target customer will show up, and then use every kind of promotion vehicles. For example, mobile phone, for example, advertisement, for example, every kind of promotion vehicles to reach the people and invite the people to the shop nearby their house, and to try this new product, to buy these new products. So this kind of coverage, it's online and offline integration. So online, we understand, we target on these customers, and then we know where they are, and then we reach them in the offline stores, big or small. So what's the result? The result right now, it's about half or 9 months, half year, 9 months. It is the #1 new hair premium brand, #1 neutral sustainability brand, #1 consumer operation brand. So it's quite successful in this case. Data analytics help to precisely identify the target consumers, and based on their preference as labels, the brands are able to know the right product positioning and the channels to reach these people. And the data analytics is based on population, not on sampling. Okay, so it's different from the traditional marketing approaches to do sampling and focus group. Now it's actually based on the 45 million the populations to develop the new product launch plan. So doing a new product launch with confidence. And the second is about online and offline integration, and also the whole value chain integration, from analysis to positioning to launch to reach to purchase. It's all done by the co-creation of Unilever, the brand, and Alibaba, the internet channel. So internet companies like Alibaba has transformed from a media distributor, used to be after the 4A companies, but now it become a decision-making intelligence plus implementation for the branding companies. So I hope with today's short time, I hope the two cases provide some practical thinking to our scholar community. Okay, so I will end my presentation here. So Phanish.
Thank you, Wei-Ru. Very interesting stuff. So I'll come back, if I may, towards the end of my presentation to ask you a few questions that I found really intriguing about your work. Let me quickly share the ideas that I had prepared for this group, and then we'll open it up, I guess, to discussion. So I'm going to be talking broadly about organizational design, which is an area I've been working on for a while, and in particular, what might be different or new in the age of algorithms. I also have to apologize in advance if you hear my dog barking in the background. He will quiet down in a second, but nobody really controls him that much. Okay, so I'm really interested in organizations, and the reason is I think it's one of our oldest and most powerful general purpose technologies, by which I mean that it's the technology on which all other technologies are built. So pretty much any major accomplishment of our species that we've had and will have going forward, including in the next 12 months, how to solve the COVID-19 crisis, it's going to be done by organizations, not by people, not by individuals, right? So this is a really powerful general purpose technology. It's also possibly among the least understood of our technologies. And the reason I say that is if you take any organizational phenomenon, whether it's startups or post-merger integration or reorganization change or organizational change projects, the average success rate for pretty much anything I've named is around 50%. Right, roughly in that ballpark. So it's like flipping coins, basically, except, this is much more consequential than flipping coins. And why is that? The reason I think is simply complexity. Organizations are very complex systems. There are many moving parts, and these interact in very non-linear ways, and it's very difficult to understand what's going on. So I do feel there is some scope for optimism, though. And the reason that optimism is there today, which it wasn't in the past, can be broken down into three parts. First, data. So much as Wei-Ru said. So what Wei-Ru has described is actually a fairly traditional marketing problem, which they are solving, which they always used to solve with data, except now they're solving it with data at the scale of the population, right? There's no sampling error anymore. So the same sort of phenomenon is occurring within organizations as well. And it's in some sense been really speeded up by the COVID-19 pandemic. The reason being, it was very hard to collect data on things like interactions, social networks, the organizational culture prior to January 2020. But in the last 4 or 5 months, what's happened is all our interactions within the organization are happening online. And that leaves a very extensive digital exhaust, which means that we now have incredible access to data on organizations actually work. And complementing that, of course, has been the big development in algorithms, in particular machine learning algorithms, which I'll mention briefly. And last but not the least, I think there are some new theoretical advances here as well, which are very relevant to putting ideas about data and algorithms together to understand organizations. So some of these new theories are developed by my collaborators and me. That by itself doesn't make them special. Our field has new theories every month. In fact, there's no paper in any of our top journals which does not claim to produce new theory. So the reason I feel optimistic about some of these new theories that we're going to talk about is they are at the right level, by which I mean they reside at the level where the data are. So a lot of the interesting insights one can get from organizations today come from data about people, about teams, about social networks. And that's where the theory in organization design, the kind of theory that we work with, is residing. And that's where we think there is scope for optimism here. So what I want to do is give you two flavors of how to think about the relationship between algorithms and organizations. First, I'll address the question of how do we use algorithms as tools and as solutions for organizational design problems. And time permitting, I'll also touch a little bit on a somewhat more futuristic idea, which is what does organization design mean in a world in which some of the members in the organization are actually algorithms. Some are human and some are algorithms. So to talk about organizational design, it's a very well-established field. There are many frameworks, there are many ideas. I'm going to use the one that comes from the research I've been doing with my collaborators, and this is summarized in the book that Patricia mentioned. The book is written for academics, but I have been able to find ways to apply many of those ideas to practice as well. I'll share a couple of them today. there are really 4 main ideas in the book. So even if you don't read the book, hopefully these 4 ideas you will take away from our webinar today. The first is the idea of generality. So an organization is any multi-agent goal-oriented system. So we don't distinguish between teams, departments, divisions, companies, ecosystems, platforms. These are all organizations because they all meet this definition of being a multi-agent goal-oriented system. Second, universality. So all organizations, regardless of which industry they're in or how small or large they are, if they meet that first definition, it must be true that they have a set of solutions to a universal set of problems. So what are these universal set of problems? They pertain to division of labor. How do you break down the goals of the organization into subtasks? And they pertain to integration of effort. How do you get the coordination and motivation to actually put those pieces back together? There are 2 other ideas which I don't use today, but I'll mention them briefly. One is this idea that design is more than structure. So we tend to think very often of design as the org structure. It's an important part, but almost as important is the process of sorting. Who is in the company and who is out, both in terms of hiring and in terms of retention. The reason being that the final outcome of the organization is always a joint product of the structure and the people who live there. And people don't get randomly assigned into companies. So there's a huge amount of sorting going on. And finally, there's the process of sense making, which is how beliefs are spread within the organization. This could be culture, this could be leadership, this could be framing. So all of these relatively softer aspects of organization are still design variables. At least that's the way that we treat them. And last but not the least, structure arises in a few basic recurring patterns. So to give you an idea, the triangular relationship between a supervisor and subordinates, multiple subordinates, which looks like a small triangle, that basic structure recurs in a wide variety of contexts. So it occurs on the shop floor, it occurs in the boardroom, it occurs between divisions in a company, it even occurs in an ecosystem. And our claim is that the same basic principles apply regardless of where it occurs. So I will focus more on the first 2 ideas today because they help us think about how algorithms can help with organization design. So elaborating on this idea that any organization has to face the same universal problems. What are these problems then? They come in 5 flavors. So there's the problem of task division, what needs to be done, task allocation, who does what, provision of rewards, who gets what, which motivates them, the provision of information, and the management of exceptions, how do disputes and problems get resolved. So broadly speaking, 1 and 2 correspond to division of labor, 3 and 4 and 5 correspond to integration of effort. Now, why is this helpful? It's helpful because now when we ask ourselves, what can algorithms, particularly machine learning algorithms, do to help with organizational design? The answer is it can either act as a tool to support a human designer who's coming up with solutions to those 5 problems I just showed you, or it could be an embedded solution to the problem. Okay, and I'm going to show you examples of both of these and you'll see exactly what I mean. So let's take each of these 5 universal problems: task division, allocation, reward provision, information provision, exception management. The first column shows you how these are solved in a traditional hierarchical organization. And I'm not going to read through it. It's fairly obvious that this is how most of the organizations you and I are familiar with, that's how they work.
Finish, maybe you want to share your video.
Slides, okay. Can you see that? Okay.
Yes.
So here we have traditional hierarchical organization, and the way it solves these problems is given in the first column. So what can algorithms do? We can use them as tools to solve each of these problems. So for instance, there are algorithms that help with task structure analysis. So we can cluster tasks into self-contained modular chunks. So project management software, which is an old kind of algorithm. For task allocation, we might use algorithms for hiring. This is one of the most common applications today of machine learning in HR and people analytics. We might use it to model churn. It's actually very similar to churn models in marketing, except now what we're trying to predict is not customers quitting, but employees quitting. We can use it to estimate compensation. We can use it to understand networks, link prediction, exactly the way LinkedIn or Facebook makes a recommendation for a friend, which is driven by data and machine learning algorithms. And we can also use simulations to prototype the structure of the organization in computers. Right? One of the applications that we are working on is how do you get organizational change to diffuse? And not surprisingly, the basic logic is not that different from the way COVID-19 spreads. So it's a diffusion process in a network. And the basic analytical structure is quite similar. So if you can simulate that, you can simulate this as well, with, of course, the right set of data and tools. The other extreme, of course, is not to use algorithms as tools, but to use them as the solution itself. So to give you an example of task division, Uber's ride recognition algorithm is doing exactly that. So it's chunking the goals of the organization into tasks, where a task is a ride, and it's making the assignment as well. And it's all doing it automatically rather than having a human dispatch clerk do it. So this is the instance of an algorithm embedding a solution rather than helping a human designer come up with a solution to task division. In terms of task allocation, I'll mention IBM's Blue Match. This is an algorithm that helps people find open opportunities within a company. So traditionally, this is what the HR department would have done. Now this can be done with an algorithm. Upwork, Fiverr, Workshopper, all of these are instances where they're using algorithms to figure out what's the right pay for the right piece of work, which is again based on historic data and past performance. Information provision. So here the software guys have actually been ahead of us by a generation. If you have written code, then you know that there are very important tools for coders called version control or continuous integration tools. And what these things do basically is they help coordinate the work of coders who are working on different parts of the same complex system. So the challenge with anything like that is my work here somewhere else. And when I put the pieces together, they might clash rather than integrate. So in the past, a human coder would have checked this. Now we have algorithms that do it pretty much automatically and point to particular areas where there can be mismatches. Now, of course, it's possible because it's code. And code works almost like math, right? It's very clear there are right and wrong answers. The syntax is either correct or not. But interestingly, you might begin to see some versions of this coming into how human managers are able to aggregate their ideas. And there are some very interesting ideas in Tom Malone's recent book, which came out last year, on the use of algorithms to help collaborative decision making. At the heart of it, it's basically a version control system. And finally, you might also think about platforms for organizing, right? So imagine 10 years from today, a startup which decides not to hire a single employee, not to own a single asset, right? But to manage everything from branding to payroll to outsourcing using a single digital platform. I think the technology to do that is already here today, right? I'm not sure there is such a platform in existence, but it's feasible. So this might be an extreme view, if you like, of what one might see if you were to think of algorithms as embedding a solution. The last thing I'll mention is to take a couple of minutes to reflect on the idea of an algorithm as a colleague in an organization. So what does that mean? Now that really sounds very futuristic, and it is, but I do believe quite honestly that this is coming somewhere to a place near you very soon. The reason being, there are already many parts of what managers do, which if you look carefully can be broken down into subtasks, some of which in fact the algorithms already do better than us. So the trick to pointing out is that there are many situations where one can take a combination of a human and an algorithm and do better than either alone. And this is some early stage work that I'm doing with colleagues here at INSEAD and elsewhere. Here's the basic intuition. So let's say there are three possible scenarios: just the human and an algorithm, and just the algorithm. So you're going to have a bunch of type A tasks where the algorithm is just clearly superior. And instances of this include image recognition. So some of the applications Wei-Ru was talking about, particularly on the order tracking, I'm sure are using things like this. Okay? So here there's no contest. This will be automated. There are also a very large number of tasks of type B, where the algorithm doesn't come close, right? And as of today, for the next 5-10 years, it's very unlikely it will. So these are often things involving judgment, involving some sort of complex, non-rule-based decision making. So in both of these situations, the way to combine humans and algorithms is pretty straightforward. You find their relative advantage and let each do what they're good at. And that's no different from the traditional logic of outsourcing or even gains from trade, right? So Adam Smith and David Ricardo had nailed this idea more than 200 years ago. The more interesting one, I think, is this case, where you start out with neither the human nor the algorithm being particularly good at solving a problem. And I think many managerial problems are like this. They're very complex, so it's kind of hard for either humans or algorithms. But somehow by putting them together, they do better, right? And that's quite mysterious. It's as if you put two idiots in a room and out came a genius. So how would that happen? And what we know about this at this point, this is a project that we're working on, is, broadly speaking, you can think of two different ways this can happen. One is the magic of error cancellation, and the other is the magic of vicarious learning. So the error cancellation mechanism works like this. Imagine three statisticians who go out hunting, and they hunt deer, and one of them shoots too far to the left, the other shoots too far to the right, and the third says, we got him. Because on average they did, right? The errors are getting cancelled. So that's a pretty old idea, but that's at the heart of things like wisdom of the crowd. And that could also work when you combine relatively imperfect humans, relatively imperfect algorithms. If their errors cancel out, the aggregation might actually do better. Another way in which this can work is vicarious learning. So when we each learn, we have our own private experience. But if we can share our experience, it can actually help de-bias the learning process. So both of these are very promising directions, I think, for thinking about how humans and algorithms in conjunction might outperform just humans or just algorithms. So let me stop there. I've given you a very quick whirlwind tour of some ideas here, but hopefully we can elaborate on these as we get into questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wei-Ru and Phanish, for the very interesting presentations. Phanish, you mentioned that you had some comments on Wei-Ru's case study. You want to share some of those thoughts?
Thank you. It's a question more than a comment, actually, Wei-Ru, which is in the two applications you described, the role of big data is obvious. Was there also a heavy role for machine learning in these things, or that wasn't really the primary driver of the success of these projects?
Yes, I think Phanish, you are right. I think currently this is just a beginning, and then you can see the data is huge, and also the algorithm is improving. So I think gradually the AI will come into a place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wei-Ru. Wei-Ru, did you have any reactions to what Phanish shared? I mean, it was a lot of frameworks and ideas of how AI could enhance decision-making within the organization and help to design. Do you see any of those within Alibaba, at least from your experience?
Yes, I think, thanks, Phanish. I think I can find his presentation very valuable and useful in the company, especially like Alibaba. So I think Alibaba changed its structure, organization structure, and changed the positioning of people quite frequently. So I haven't seen a company that is doing like this or need to do like this. I believe that in the future, when the competition become very serious, the organization need to change their organization structure. It's very much like you launch a new product. For example, like 6 months, 3 months, you have to change once. But right now, that with only humans' intuition or humans' experience, we are basically in a try and error kind of stages. And then that maybe a one mistake will delay your, will kill you. So I think in the future, if there is like a human plus AI kind of combination applied into the organization to the organization. Yeah, thanks for the sharing.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you both. So maybe just to resonate or to kind of align what we are both learning from you is essentially, you know, what Phanish was referring to as this automation versus augmentation, idea. And I really also like, you know, the last ideas you pointed out in terms of, you know, how can we combine humans and machines, so to speak, to really make better decisions. So Wei-Ru, if you think about, you know, your work at Alibaba, do you have any already experiments going on where, you know, you can really, in the strategic decision-making process, where you see evidence that machines or ML, you know, data analytics help the decision makers in the decision making process, or maybe even in the analytical stage?
Okay, I think the operational level has been largely kind of replaced by the algorithm. So algorithm is like a machine's kind of decision making. But I think in the future, the the major factor for the machine decision making to expand will be whether the machine decision making is based on justice, fair, no bias. And if the algorithm is developed by human, the algorithm has some kind of selfish kind of factor, and that will make the machine's algorithm distrusted by the people, and that algorithm will not be able to implement in the organization. So I think trust and fair and justice is really very much the key for the AI to be developed.
Yes, I agree. So there's this notion of that you should even maintain a healthy sense of distrust amongst towards the algorithms as you proceed adopting more of them, right? So that's a really important point, and thank you for sharing that.
Let me add one thing. However, I think the justice may be culture differentiated, or maybe the fair. I mean, it depends on the organizational culture, depends on the national culture, right? So you probably don't have a one size to all. So I think this is more complicated than what we think. There is something to solve. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and this resonates back with, or links back with what Phanish was suggesting, right? That organization design is way more than just structure. It starts with the people, right? So you have to get the culture, you have to get the people ready to make data analytics work in reality.
That's correct. And often, if I might add quickly, I think one of the kind of bitter disappointments of people who begin to use algorithms is to realize that just having a lot of data does not mean that these algorithms will work. Right? What you also need is that the data is representative, that it's stationary, right? You may have a lot of data, but if the world is changing so rapidly that yesterday's data is not relevant to tomorrow, then these algorithms don't help.
Yep, thank you on that one. And I fully agree, and there's this big debate even among practitioners, that they want to get started with data analytics, but the data is not available in a structured format, in a longitudinal format, to really analyze it and deduct some certain patterns that might inform decision making, right? Thank you so much on that one. Daniel, do you want to take a question? Because I saw we have a couple of questions in the Q&A now.
All right, so we do have a question in the Q&A list, one from Mani, that's asking about the trade-off between increasing the delivery times. I think it's targeted to Wei-Ru, right? You mentioned about how data analytics could actually reduce the delivery times, right? From, in your presentation, you mentioned from 5 days to about 1.9 or 1.7 days, right? But on the other side to this effect is that there are also costs involved in trying to make sure that we increase efficiency. So where do you think the optimal delivery times should be? I mean, Amazon has been trying to improve on this by increasing the services by giving 1 day delivery times and all that. Do you think this is sustainable in the long run? And does data analytics allow us to close that gap between order and delivery?
Yeah, I think this is a very good question. I think when I was in academia, I would think that the optimal would be the major decision making. So you need to think about optimal, and then you go to do the optimal. But I found that the business leaders' idea is that we need to establish our capability first. So if we establish the capability to deliver everything, no matter how far is inside China or even global, within 1 day, if we have the capability, then we can do differentiation. For example, if the particular people just feel okay for 3 days, when we can give him 3 days. But the particular person need 1 day, even 3 hours, even 1 hour, then we have the capability to do in 1 hour, and then pricing will be another issue, right? So if you want to pay, we can set this as a priority. We have the capability to deliver, and then we can have a multiple treatment to multiple different customers. Yeah.
So I think what you're trying to say is that there's some form of expectations involved in trying to judge the performance of AI and data analytics, right? Because now, given the COVID situation, I think the expected delivery time is about 2 weeks or even more. So I guess in some sense, there's some sort of expectations that's involved in using data analytics.
Yes. So I think you can sense that from my presentation that based on the data, we are able to see the particular person who kind of keep the products in the cabinet very long, for example, 2 or 3 days without picking it up. Or some customers pick it up within 1 or 2 hours. Then we in the future we can have a different treatment to these 2 kinds of customers, right? If we don't want the product to be placed in the cabinet, we want the turnover rate to be higher, then we probably deliver directly to the person's home without letting him to kind of put his items in the cabinet for 2 days. But or we can kind of charge the punishment fee for the particular people. So we are able to do the kind of global optimization based on where is the bottleneck. Is the delivery person as a bottleneck, or it's a cabinet space as a bottleneck or something, and to do a pricing in order to kind of making a global optimal.
Okay, thank you, Wei-Ru. Patricia, would you like to take the next question?
Yeah, sure. So that's a question that, you touched upon already a little bit, but I'd like to point it out. Is this notion that, you obviously have to train the algorithm, and there's inherent biases involved in that, right? So what's your take on that one? Since, human decision makers obviously are also subject to biases in decision making, and then these human decision makers, try to train or provide the data to train an algorithm. What are the challenges associated with that, and how can we address that issue? So who wants to share their perspective on that one?
I'm happy to give it a shot, and then maybe Wei-Ru wants to add something. So for sure, bias in training data is a big problem, and there's no easy way to escape it. There are 2 practical things that we have started seeing people trying out. First is the idea that when working with data on people, even if you give up a little bit on predictive accuracy, it's better to go with simpler and transparent models than more complex ones. So to give you an example, if you have a choice between a logistic regression versus, say, a random forest or a deep learning algorithm to make a prediction on whom to hire or who's likely to quit, all else being equal, I would give up a few percentage points of accuracy and go with logistic regression. Because it's fairly easy to explain, right? So there is some kind of human checking feasible. The more complicated and non-linear the algorithm, it's very hard to even explain why the algorithm is making the decision it's making. Second, one very powerful way to avoid bias in training data is actually very simple. Make some of your hiring decisions at random. Okay, and that's actually a proven technology. So if you can actually create some randomness in your hiring, I had a short piece on this in INSEAD Knowledge you might want to look up called Enlightened by Randomness. So if some of your hires are at random, they will help the algorithms escape the bias in the data. Okay, and there's some very interesting statistical work showing this to be generally true, but I'll leave you with these 2 quick ideas.
Thank you. Wei-Ru, do you want to add us anything?
No, I think Phanish is doing very perfectly. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, good. Daniel, do you want to take the next one?
Yep. So I think the next question is more about the it's more of an academic take on this, right? So I think that's the case presented by Wei-Ru is more targeted towards the marketing side of things, where we are trying to measure and gauge consumer preferences. But for strategy scholars, where do you think the next area where we can actually research and derive new insights on AI could be, and on data analytics as well?
Do you want me to take a shot at it, Daniel?
Yes, Phanish, please.
Sure. So I think a lot of these algorithms and big data techniques are actually more useful for strategy researchers than practicing strategy people. And the reason is very simple. Most strategic decisions don't occur with high enough frequency to generate enough data, right? So the machine learning algorithm that tells me whether I can acquire a company is still some way off because the data sets are just not deep enough to do that, right? That's the problem. On the other hand, as researchers, this is fantastic because we can now, scrape big data. We can look at really subtle questions, right? So we can look at organizational culture using text. We can look at transaction history spanning hundreds of thousands of deals to find very subtle patterns that we might not have found with traditional statistical methods. There's actually a forthcoming paper with some collaborators I wrote, is coming out in organizational science, on using machine learning to build theory. So how can we use algorithms to look for patterns in data and then extract theory from that? So actually, I think the application of these techniques to researchers in strategy right now looks more promising than for strategy practitioners because of this data constraint. But I'm sure Alibaba will show us that we are wrong, and very soon they'll be using it for strategy as well. So we'll wait for that day.
All right, thank you, Phanish. Wei-Ru, do you think there's any insights from your end?
Yes, I think based on my experience of in practice, I found that the training we have in the PhD program in a scholarly path has helped us a lot. So I think the companies really need people who like us, who has the academic kind of management academic background. It's not just purely engineers who don't know the management philosophy or management principles. So if we as management scholars can leverage on our so-called research training and go into the company and work with one or two deeply, but not kind of spread and touch and leave or something. You kind of need to nurture the trust and then go deep into the company. The company has a lot of data, and then you can probably use the data to generate a single case paper. But the single case paper is different from the past. I think it has a rich data and a rich process. And I really hope that our scholar, our strategy scholar, can really did more different things for the community.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, thank you so much. So, we are close to approaching the end, and I apologize for the technical issues we were facing. We are covering different time zones here. So maybe before we wrap it up, just a few thoughts from you, Phanish and Weiru. Maybe a final thought on this notion of AI, data analytics in strategy and in organizational research. Any promising themes you would recommend the researchers among us to pursue in the future? Any challenges you encountered in your own research that you would like to share? So any final thoughts for the academics among us?
So I do feel more optimistic about the application of these. Being within an organization, the unit of data is often the individual. So you can get lots of data. And I think I already mentioned this, the COVID-19 pandemic has created a huge digital database of interactions within organizations. So that means that in the next year or so, we are going to see an amazing explosion of social network analysis, mood analysis, sentiment analysis, text analysis, organizational structure. So a lot of this will be done with data for the first time probably ever in our history. So that's a very exciting area. The more kind of one-off big capex decisions, those still remain, I think, very hard to put into algorithms.
Thank you, Phanish. Weiru, anything you would like to add? Some final thoughts? Maybe even like from the practitioner side, right, where you see the promising trends going on at Alibaba and elsewhere, where AI and data analytics might really be of value, but also the challenges that you perceive.
Yes, I think what Phanish just said is I totally agree with that. There will be more and more digital data available for us to do research. And I would like to add that then it becomes even more important of the human's mindset and thinking to move from selfish to great love. I think this is really a great challenge to the scholar like us, because we used to publish paper just for ourselves. How can we kind of move this into a next stage to really have a mercy to these companies, business people who are suffering in this digital transformation, and we can really contribute them to help them to accompany with them. So I would say that the business really require great brands to help. However, they hesitate to work with a professor who just came in and asked to write a case and leave and bye-bye and no more kind of help. So I think this require a long-term kind of a company. So that's my what I will add.
Thank you, Wei-Ru. And I think you're the perfect example of living this model in your own life, by bridging academic and practitioner spheres. Thank you. I think these were fantastic concluding statements also on the subjects we covered today, that we consider this notion or this role of AI from a pretty broad perspective. But ultimately, you know, we have to start with the people in the organizations and the organizational phenomena to really hopefully have some impact also on the practitioner side. We promised you to keep that to 1 hour, so thank you so much. That was really fascinating and excellent discussion today. Thank you for the great insights, and also thanks to the audience for joining us and for your great questions. And that being said, have a lovely remaining evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Phanish. Thank you, Weiru.
Good to see you, and thanks all for joining the show.
Thank you. Bye-bye.